There is no anxiety quite like that of unmet expectation. Come on now. We've all been there, and in some place in our lives right now, whether you want to believe it or not, acknowledge it or not, you're there too. It's that place that, quite honestly, when you start to think about it, or when it comes to light, that you feel like a failure. You feel like right there, you don't measure up. You feel like you're not significant, you're not valuable, you're not worthy, and you believe these things in the core of who you are. It's anxiety over what hasn't happened, what isn't happening, and what maybe can't ever possibly happen because of what did happen. When life isn't going like you thought, what many of us do is we respond, we lean in, we get overwhelmed by anxiety. And it is to that feeling on today that I came to announce to you the words of the Apostle Paul that we have been re-leaning into as we begin every one of these installments of Anxious for Nothing, because it's just that. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, Paul says, be anxious. Come on, somebody say it, sitting in the den right now. Be anxious for nothing. Somebody needs to type that in the chat just as a word of encouragement. I know it's the series, but as a word of encouragement to people watching with you right now, people watching on Facebook, people watching at church online. Be anxious for nothing. Today, for a few moments, I want to turn our attention to this idea. When life isn't going like you thought, the anxiety that hits us when our expectations were one thing, but our reality was another. What do you do when what is your life looks nothing like what you expected for your life? Come on, you thought you'd be on your feet by now. You thought you would be well known, famous even by now. You thought you'd be graduated by now, but you're not. You thought you'd own your own home by now. Come on, you thought you would have started your own business. You thought you would have had a stable job by now. You thought you would have been on salary by now. You thought you would have been out of debt by now. You thought that addiction that you've carried for a long time, that addiction that you have fought for a long time would have been nothing by now, but yet it still creeps. What do you do when you thought that those thoughts that you believed about yourself, those thoughts that you thought you'd be over by now, you would grow out of by now? What do you do when what is your life looks nothing like what you expected your life to be? Can I tell you something very true as we begin today, before we even begin to unpack the scriptures together? Everyone thinks their life should follow their plans. Everybody does. Everybody has a plan for their life. Everybody has a thought, an idea. I expect it to look this way. I expect it to be this way. But nobody's life actually follows their plans. Nobody's does. There's not a person listening to this podcast, not a person watching this online, who your life goes according to the plans that you had for it. And that's not all bad. Because sometimes there's really good that comes to our lives that we would have never seen before. And if life would have just followed what we expected, if life would have just met our expectations, the reality is that some of us would have missed some of the best parts of our life. See, if God always met your expectations, then he'd never have the ability to exceed your expectations. If you've been around me for a minute or two, maybe you've joined us at church online, maybe you've ever come into one of our physical locations, maybe we ever met up in my office sometime. Here's what's true about me that's very easy to pick up on. I love Memphis. Like, I love this city. It's not just something I say. It's not just something that is neither. I am Memphis. You know, I love Memphis. But I never expected to be that. See, I grew up in Memphis. I grew up in like Oak Haven, Whitehaven area over near the airport, born and raised there. And Memphis was where I was from. When I graduated from high school, I moved to Texas, Dallas specifically, to go to seminary and to study ministry and the Bible and those kind of things. And I moved there and I loved Texas. I did. I loved Dallas. And while I was there, people would ask me where I was from, and I tell them I was from Memphis. But the truth is, I was just Swiss on being from Memphis, if you will. Like, it was not this positive thing or this negative thing. It's just where I was from. I didn't tell people when I was in Texas, man, I'm from Memphis. It's the greatest city in the world. I love it. I can't wait to get back, because that honestly wasn't the way I felt then. But I also wasn't one of them people, and some of you like this, and get thee behind me. But I wasn't one of the people like, yeah, I'm from Memphis, and I got out of there as quick as I could. Like, no. Memphis is where I was from. I lived in Texas for almost 9 years, going to school, serving at a church there that I've been a part of that I loved. And I honestly thought, man, if you would have grabbed me when I was 18 or 22, 24, you would and asked me, where are you going to be? I thought I was going to live in Dallas, be in Texas, be in this church for the rest of my life. But God had different plans. And after almost 9 years of being there, we moved. And through that move, God used that time to burden my heart for the city of Memphis. To burden my heart to start a church that is now believing. To be about the city. To be of the city. And for the city. For the good of the city. And I remember making that step into it. Because when we stepped into Memphis, and stepped into trying to start this thing called believing, everything from my life changed. Like, my friends changed. Some people that said, man, we're going to be ride or die. It was more like ride until you go, and then we out. My security changed. I went from being in a very predictable environment, you can count on these things environment, to a no securities sort of environment. My role changed. My team, the people that were around me, opportunities changed. There were opportunities that were in front of me that weren't in front of me anymore. Everything changed. And if you would have told me as a kid growing up in Memphis that I would be living in Memphis and life would look like this, I don't know that I would believe you, because that wouldn't have been in my plans. But I couldn't love life more. I love this city. I love what God is doing. I love what he's called us to do. I love what we're building. I love what he's doing through us, what he's doing through you. I love the impact that's here. I love seeing a community literally begin to slowly transform before our eyes. I love it. But it's not what I thought. See, it's not if life doesn't go like you thought. But when life doesn't go like you thought. Some of us think that there are these exceptions where in this area life hasn't gone like I thought. No. It's not if, it's when. You may be in high school. You may be in college. I have news for you. You have great dreams and plans for your life. That's wonderful. Life isn't going to go like you thought. Some of you are in your 20s, you're in your 30s, you're in your 40s, wherever you may be, and you're in the middle of life and things are happening and you got plans and you got timelines and you got goals. I'm here to tell you, to warn you, life is not going to go like you thought. Some of you are in your 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, and you can look back on a lot more life than maybe you feel like you have in front of you. And you can announce with emphasis to all of us that life ain't going to go like you thought, and that's okay. It's okay. Somebody in the chat just needs to type, it's okay. See, because the Bible is filled with people who experience things that did not go like they expected. It's filled with the stories of men and women just like you and me. Moms and dads. People who started things and they failed. People who were called to do great work and the work didn't happen greatly. Or called to do great work and the work did happen greatly. filled with people who lived these incredible lives that did not go like they expected. And on parts of their journey, they were filled with anxiety. People who were supposed to be leaders, people who were supposed to change things, people who were supposed to help other people. But one of my favorites, and there are so many we could touch on, is a woman who we come to know her in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 4. And she's a woman known as the Shunammite Woman. And for a few moments today, I want to take some time and help you deal with anxiety. To every person who would be honest enough to recognize that your life right now is not going like you expected. What is not what you thought you would be. And sometimes you wake up and you're depressed. You wake up and you're anxious. You wake up and you're frustrated because what is not what you thought would be. I have news for you today that will come in the form of hope through this woman that we just call the Shunammite Woman. So we're going to read pretty extensively her story today. In fact, by extensively, I mean all of it. But don't worry, we ain't going to read it all at once. We're going to bits and piece it together. And my prayer for you in a few moments is that what you'll experience and what you'll know is how to fight anxiety in every area of your life, but particularly when life isn't going like you expected. Come on, if you're ready for God's word today, somebody in the chat just say, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. 2 Kings chapter 4, beginning in verse 8. Here's the way the scripture reads. It says, one day Elisha went to Shunem. A prominent woman who lived there persuaded him to eat some food. So whenever he passed by, he stopped there to eat. Then she said to her husband, I know that the one who often passes by here is a holy man of God. So let's make a small, walled-in upper room and put a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp there for him. Whenever he comes, he can stay there. One day he came there and stopped at the upstairs room to lie down. He ordered his attendant, Gehazi, call the Shunammite woman. So he called her, and she stood before him. Then he said to Gehazi, say to her, look, you've gone through all this trouble for us. What can we do for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army? She answered, I am living among my own people. In other words, she said, I'm good. So he asked, what should be done for her? Gehazi answered, well, she has no son, and her husband, he old. Call her, Elisha said. So Gehazi called her, and she stood in the doorway. Elisha said, at this time next year, you will have a son in your arms. And then she said, no, my Lord. Man of God, do not lie to your servant. The woman conceived and gave birth to a son at the same time the following year as Elisha had promised her. This Shunammite woman is a complex person like we all are, right? She is a leader in her community. She knows everything about everyone and knows everyone. And she decides to do this really, really great thing for the man of God. See, it may not seem all that significant to us, but Elisha's work was to travel around, and apparently he passed by where the Shunammite woman lived quite often. And there was no Holiday Inn, no Westin for them to sort of like check into and be like, we're just going to spend a night or two here and then get on our way. There were no restaurants for them to kind of post up in and eat. You had to rely on the generosity of family members or just simply people that may be there. And that's what the Shunammite woman displayed. That time after time, they kept feeding him. He was basically coming by to get a meal on his journey from here to there, because as Elisha's work called him, he would be over here and then be over there and then be back over there. And she sees a need that he has. Need to have a place to stay because he's passing through here all the time. And she decides to act on it because that's how she was. She was a problem solver. But have you thought for a second as to why she might do this great thing for the man of God? Was it because she loved God herself? We don't necessarily know that. Was it because he's doing God's work? I mean, maybe she acknowledges the fact that she knows that the man that comes through here a lot with the servant who they be eating at the dinner table, like, he is a man of God. Like, he's a holy man. Like, she acknowledges that. So maybe. Or was it because fixing others' perceived problems is what she used to drown her own problem? Maybe that too. See, there was no woman in that day who would have been okay with not having a child. Now, I know there are many people who live today. You'll talk to people, maybe you're this way. You say, man, I don't want kids. I understand, believe me, I understand. Like, I don't want kids. But that thought was inconceivable in this day. Every woman wanted children, and most specifically, a son. Because of the nature of the culture, because of the nature of the value of women that was very, very low at that time and not good. A woman's contribution to society as they saw it was to have children. And to be a woman who didn't have children was to be a very low thing when it comes to worth. So no woman, including prominent women, including a Shunammite woman, would have been okay with not having a child unless you'd given up hope. Unless you had come to the point, you found yourself at the place where you decided, I am not going to even carry this. I'm not going to even think about this anymore. I'm not going to worry about this anymore. I'm actually going to try to cover it up in all of my activity. And I'm going to get involved in your business, and I'm going to be involved in every community activity I can. And if they need somebody to run the PTA, I'll run the PTA. And you need somebody to run on the council, I'll run on the council. I will be prominent in this area. I will fill my life so that I don't have to think about the fact that I don't have what I always expected to have. I have news for you today that you can write down in your notes. Just because you're drowning your anxiety doesn't mean you're handling your anxiety. Just because you found some way, you found something, you found some practice to begin to cover up your anxiety does not mean that you are handling it. Because when life isn't going like you expected, what happens is we drown what we feel in vice and in virtue. There's a lot of people who are addicted to alcohol because you are literally drowning your anxiety in alcohol every night. It's what helps you wind down. It's what helps you go to sleep. You know you drink too much, but it's a vice that helps you drown your anxiety because you tell yourself, I'm handling it, when really all you're doing is covering it up. But some people don't do it as something that others look at as a vice. They use virtuous things. Some of you are drowning your anxiety in an overfilled schedule. You get your kids involved in so many things. You involve yourself in so many things. You literally schedule everything from before you get up to after you go to sleep. You fill every waking hour of every single day, and you fill it. Somebody needs something, you'll fill it in. I can do this for 5 minutes. I can do this for 15 minutes, and I can take care of this, and I can be there, and I can be all things to all people. And you overfill your schedule, and what you're actually doing is you're trying to cover up the anxiety of unmet expectation. Some people buy stuff. Some people get online late at night just buying stuff. I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to buy this. Because somehow the fact that you have a little money in the bank, you buy some new things, covers up the anxiety that you feel towards expectations in other areas of your life that have not been met. People try to drown their anxiety with busyness, with pornography, with hobbies, even under the name of family. Some people, because of unmet expectations in other places, drown themselves in their own families. And it sounds so virtuous. Remember, you can drown yourself in vice or virtue. See, this Shunammite woman had learned how to cope with being what she never imagined. And she didn't cope. She didn't cover it. She didn't drown it in something nefarious. She didn't have this terrible quality about herself. She was a prominent woman who filled her days not the way she ever intended to fill them, but handling stuff for everybody else everywhere, maybe so that she could turn off the fact for a moment that the expectation she had always had for herself never came to be. Because she certainly had been trying to have kids. There's no doubt. How do I know? Because when the man of God promises her a kid, her response is not, oh, thank you. Not, yes. Her response is combative. Her response is, man of God, you best not be lying. Don't toy with me. You know, you can talk about things to certain people if they've never struggled there. But if you struggled there, don't play with that. Right? Come on, if you've ever struggled in an area, it's like, that is awful. Don't be messing with that. And she'd been struggling. She'd been praying, believing, trying, doing all she could. She'd probably gone to every doctor she could find. She'd talked to her husband about it. They'd done all sorts of things, trying to get her pregnant, and it never happened. And now the man of God's going to come through. When she's figured out, finally, how to cope with the reality that is her reality, that was not what she expected. It was shameful, culturally, for her to not have a child. But the potential of an unrealized dream felt like too much for her to bear. And that's why she said, man of God, no. And many of us on today, I know this is heavy. If you're watching this at church online, it's Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. Good to see your mom. I know this is heavy, but stay with me. I'm trying to help you on today. Many of us are just like her, trying to cope with being what we never thought we'd be. You made a vow to yourself. You said, I'm not going to be like my parents. But you start to listen to yourself talk to your kids, and you sound just like your parents. You made a decision, a determination. I'm not going to be manipulative anymore. I manipulated my way through high school. I manipulated my way through college. I manipulated my way through some of my early relationships, and I decided I'm going to put that down. But here you are, and you look at yourself in the way you try to control situations and people, and you are more manipulative than you've ever been. You made a decision. I'm not going to struggle with money. I'm going to be good. I'm going to follow the plan. But the problem is, here you are, grown, working, making money, still struggling with money. You say you're not going to lose your temper anymore. But every time, just a little bit, boom, you snap. You said, I'm not going to disconnect from faith, but yet the rhythm of your faith journey has been a few months in church, a few months close to God, a few years away, a few weeks in, a few months out, a few days in, a few years out. But you said, I'm not going to be disconnected from faith anymore. I'm going to be faithful in God's house. I'm going to be faithful to his purposes. But yet here you are. You said, I'm not going to be unstable. You're going to be able to count on me, except nobody can count on you. Many of us are in a space right now, in some area, not every area, but in some area, where we're trying to cope with being what we never thought we'd be. Because you plan to be successful, you plan to be present, you plan to be free, you plan to be kind, but then here you are. And what we do is we cover our anxiety, which gives us this pseudo control, but it never permanently cures it. Oh, that's the reason we like a good cover-up. That's the reason, just like the Shunammite woman, we'll try to drown our anxiety because it gives us this semblance, this pseudo control that I've got this handled. Oh, I know everybody else would be distraught about not having a kid as a woman of my age, a married woman like me. I know everybody else with a husband as old as he is would probably be worried that we hadn't had kids yet. But I'm okay. I'm a prominent woman. I get stuff done. People come to me. Man of God stays at my house. Because part of our anxiety runs out of a place, runs out of a foundation where there's something there that we feel the need to control, but we can't. She'd stopped believing because it was more comfortable for her to take on the label of the prominent woman with no kids than the heartache of continuing to believe that she would be a mom one day and not be. Because she's just like us. We'd rather be in control than be cured. Because we think control prevents anxiety, and it doesn't. Let's keep reading, verse 18. Remember, man of God has just come to the Shunammite woman and said, a year from now, you're going to have a child. She said, man of God, no. A year later, she got a little boy. It says the child grew and one day went out to his father and the harvesters. Suddenly, he complained to his father, my head, my head. His father told his servant, carry him to his mother. Come on, y'all, some things ain't changed. You know what I'm saying? So he picked up him and took him to his mother. The child sat on her lap until noon and then died. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God and shut him in and left. She summoned her husband and said, please send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys so I can hurry to the man of God and come back again. But he said to her, why go to him today? It's not a new moon or a Sabbath. In other words, it's not this ain't Christmas or Easter. What are we doing going to see the man of God? She replied, it's all right. Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, go fast. Don't slow the pace for me unless I tell you. Now, there's something in here I can't figure out. I can't figure out if that was faith or pain talking when she said to her husband, it's all right. Because remember now, it's been a bit. I know it happened in 2 or 3 verses, but it's been a bit. Because the man of God, you best not be lying to me, happened a year before baby boy came into the picture. But now baby boy is old enough to not be baby boy anymore. To go run out into the field and see dad and see the people working with dad. I mean, he old enough. She's 5 years, 10 years removed from what she had gotten comfortable with drowning. Now becoming her reality. The expectation that she had that she never thought would be met because of what her plight was, now was being met. And she had been walking in that, living in that for years. I can't tell if it's pain talking or faith talking. Because she'd become the prominent woman who handled all the things, but this was something she couldn't control. Maybe part of her fear of the miracle in the first place was that the man of God would promise something that she could not control. But now she's mom to a little miracle until the miracle dies. What do you do when what started as a miracle is no more? What do you do? Where do you go? Who do you turn to when what came to you as a miracle is no more? It was a miracle that this happened. It was a miracle that I found them. It was a miracle that all these things started to change. But what happens when those are no more? Because what happens for too many of us is we run from God. We run from his people. We run from his house. We run from his ways rather than run to where they know he is. See, that's what I love about the Shunammite woman. When the unthinkable happened to her miracle, she didn't run from the presence of God. She ran to the presence of God. She didn't run away. She ran towards. See, where you go when it's not going like you expected indicates where you put your faith. Where you go when whatever is going on doesn't look like you expected indicates where you've put your faith. That's why before the miracle, when life wasn't going like she expected, she had put her faith in her ability to create a life and intellect. She had created this strength. She had created this prominence and put her faith in that. But now something has changed in her journey. And now this miracle has come to her. But this miracle somehow leaves her. And rather than run back to her previous vices, she runs to the one who she knows God. She runs to the place where she knows she can meet God. And if your reality today is far from what you expected, you're ready to give up, would you hear me? Go to God. Come on, somebody in that chat today, type go to God. Go to God. Give God your burden. Give God your expectations. Give God your dream. Give God your hurts. Give God your anguish. Give God your failures. Give God your concerns. Give God your mistakes. Give God your disappointments, because he can't handle it. That's what the Shunammite woman does. In fact, verse 25 says it this way. It says, so she came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to his attendant Gehazi, look, there's the Shunammite woman. Run out and meet her and ask, are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your son all right? And she answered, it's all right. We've heard that before. Was it pain or was it faith? When she came to the man of God at the mountain, she clung to his feet. Gehazi came to push her away, but the man of God said, leave her alone. She is in severe anguish, and the Lord has hidden from me it. He hasn't told me. Then she said, did I ask my Lord for a son? Didn't I say, don't lie to me? So Elisha said to Gehazi, tucking your mantle under your belt, take my staff with you and go. If you meet anyone, don't stop to greet him. If a man greets you, don't answer him. Then place my staff on the boy's face. The boy's mother said to Elisha, as the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you. So he got up and followed her. There is an urgency in this woman now. There's an urgency that we have not seen in her until this moment. She runs to where the man of God is at an unordinary time. And she clings to his feet. And she vows to herself and to him that I'm not leaving you because I have a need and I now recognize I can't control it, but I believe the God you serve can. Stop treating abnormal needs with normal desperation. Too many of us treat abnormal needs in our life with normal desperation. She runs to Elisha. She ain't got time to talk to nobody. She ain't got time to be nice to nobody, to entertain nobody. And she clung to his feet, which was a sign of force for the asking of something. When you cling to the feet of another, you are lowering, you are begging with everything that you have. Please help me. She had had her way of drowning her anxiety before. And God blessed her by giving her what she always dreamed of. But now, it's gone. She's not about to treat her now new unmet expectations with the same pomp, circumstance, and dignity that she would have acted with before. See, we can learn something from her here. That many of us in our buttoned up, I'm concerned about my image, society need to get. We need desperation for God rather than a comfortable response for God. See, most of us, the line for us when it comes to worshiping God, when it comes to following God, when it comes to trusting God, when it comes to leveraging our life towards God. The line is always our comfortability. Stop treating abnormal needs with normal desperation. Some of you got some abnormal things going on in your life. You got some abnormal anxiety. You are carrying weight and it's too much for you, but you are responding with normal desperation. It's time to get uncomfortable. It's time to start worshiping in a way that may feel uncomfortable for you. It may feel uncomfortable to lift your hands, but lift up your hands. It may feel uncomfortable to sing out loud, but sing out loud. It may feel uncomfortable to take time every day to declare the goodness of God, but take time every day to declare the goodness of God because you got an abnormal need. And you need to stop responding with a normal sense of desperation. There needs to be something desperate on the inside of you that says, God, if you don't touch this, God, if you don't come through, I have nowhere else to turn but you. David said, who do I have in heaven but you? We need to stop praying prayers that aren't desperate. Talk about my little now I lay me down to sleep. Baby, there needs to be desperation in your prayers. Some of us, we give up to the line of our own comfortability. We'll give of our time, we'll give of our money, we will give of our talent up to the level of we're comfortable. If you got an abnormal need, you need to get desperate for God. Desperate for him. Because if life isn't going like you thought, you got to hang on tight to the only one who can make it right. And some of you today, your life isn't going right. It's not going like you expected. It's not going like you planned. It's not going like you dreamed. It's not going like you can handle. But the problem is you're still coming to God with normal desperation. Baby, it's time to let down your hair. It's time to run to the presence of God and say, I will not leave here. Verse 31. Gehazi went ahead of them and placed the staff on the boy's face. But there was no sound or sign of life. So we went back and met Elisha and told him the boy didn't wake up. When Elisha got to the house, he discovered the boy lying dead on his bed. So he went in, closed the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. He went up and lay on the boy. He put mouth to mouth, eye to eye, hand to hand. When he bent over him, the boy's flesh became warm. Elisha got up, went into the house, and paced back and forth. Then he went up and bent down over him again. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Then Elisha called Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite woman. He called her, and she came. Then Elisha said, pick up your son. She came, don't miss this, fell at his feet and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and left. I do not want you to miss what happens here at the end, because God does a miracle through Elisha. Brings the Shunammite woman's son back to life. But the Shunammite woman brought the same energy to the provision as she did to the need. Oh, you missed it. She brought the same energy. Somebody in that chat type, bring that same energy. She brought the same energy to the provision that she did to the need. The miracle happens. God restored what had been lost. But she wasn't like most of us who'd be walking around talking about God better had. No. She fell at his feet in gratitude like she previously had in need. Remember when she had a need, she said, it's all right, husband. I just need the fastest donkey we got and a servant who can run. Let's go. And she gets to the man of God. I ain't got time to talk to nobody. I ain't got time for Gehazi. And she clings to the feet of the man of God. God, I need you to show up. God, I need you to meet this need. God, I need you to come through. What is happening? That's the way a lot of us feel when we get anxious. God, I'm anxious about my finances. I'm anxious about my future. I'm anxious about this relationship. I don't know what to do with my children. I don't know what to do with this business. I don't know what to do with next week. Bring that same energy to when God supplies for your need. Because then Elisha makes it to the house. God heals her son. He says, hey, why don't you come get your son? And she ain't even studying her son. She clings to his feet again in gratitude. The same way that she asked, she thanked. Can I help you right here at the end of this series and the end of this sermon? Deal with your anxiety for good, particularly on unmet expectations. But I promise you, you can take this and apply it in every anxious battle you have. If you're more desperate than you are thankful, you'll live anxious for anything. Your anxiety is a byproduct of your lack of thankfulness. I'm going to say that again. Your anxiety is a byproduct of your lack of thankfulness. And if you're more desperate, God, I need this, then you are thankful. God, thank you for what you've done. You will live anxious for anything, because you'll be more anxious about what you don't have than you are thankful for what you do. See, that's the reason some of you are so consumed with anxiety, because you expected to be in this house, this neighborhood, have these things, and you don't have them things yet. And the reason you're anxious is because you're focused on what you don't have, rather than thankful for the fact that you got a car that'll get you from A to B, rather than thankful for the fact that you got a roof over your head. It may not be as much roof as some other people have, but you got a roof, baby. And if you're more desperate than you are thankful, you'll live anxious for anything. Because you're more anxious about who you're not than you are thankful for who you are. You're still worried about what it is that you're not, and the accolades that you don't have, and the qualities that you haven't developed, rather than be thankful for who you are. And look what God has done, and look how he's transformed my life. I may not be what I ought to be, but I thank God that I'm not what I'm used to be. See, you're anxious about where you're at, rather than being thankful for how far God's brought you. Can I tell you, if you're more desperate than you are thankful, you're going to live anxious for anything. But if you're more thankful than you are desperate, you'll live anxious for nothing. If you get more thankful than you are desperate, you will live anxious for nothing. The people I know that have the least anxiety are not the wealthiest. They're not the most famous. They're the most grateful. They're the ones who are thankful. God, I thank you I got breath in my lungs. God, I thank you for all that you have done. If you're more thankful than you are desperate, you will live anxious for nothing. Bring that same energy that you bring to desperation to your praise. Don't just bring all that energy to your problems. Bring it to your praise as well. See, the Shunammite woman knew this, and she lived this. Oh, there's a version of her that used to drown her problems in her preeminence, used to drown her problems in her prestige in her community. I don't really need you to do anything for me, man of God. You know, everybody knows us here, and I'm kind of the woman around here. Like, I make things go. She used to drown it in herself, but she got to a point where she got grateful for all that God had done, grateful for all that God was to her, grateful for all that he had provided, grateful for all that he would do. And now she could drown her problems in praise. The cure for her anxiety was thankfulness to God. And to every anxious person under the sound of my voice, it's time for you to drown your anxiety in thanks to God. Come on, you may be sitting in your bedroom right now. I'm going to ask you to stand up on your feet. You watching this in a den, come on, you anywhere where you can stand up on your feet. And I know ain't nobody around you, but would you take about 10 or 15 seconds and begin to give thanks to God? Thank him for his goodness. Thank him for his faithfulness. Come on, thank him like you ain't never thanked him before. Clap your hands, lift your voice, give God honor and praise, and I promise you what'll happen is your anxiety ain't got nowhere to go but down, because if you'll get more thankful than you are desperate, you'll live anxious for nothing. So every time anxiety tries to creep in because you're not where you thought you'd be, because you don't have what you thought you'd have, I dare you to get thankful. I dare you to lift up a shout, to lift up a praise, and watch how you become anxious for nothing. God, I love you. And I thank you today for every good thing in our lives. Your word tells us that every good, every perfect gift comes from you. And God, we are so grateful for that on today. And Father, I pray for every person under the sound of my voice whose heart, whose mind, whose emotions are full of anxiety right now. Anxiety because of what they're not. Anxiety because of what they don't have. Anxiety because of what they haven't done. And it weighs on them. And it seems to be sucking the life out of them. Father, I pray you lift their spirit today as they begin to lift praise to you. Let them realize that the way to live anxious for nothing is to be thankful for everything that you've done. Thankful for everything that you've given. Thankful for everything that you've provided. And so every time the enemy wants to tell them to be anxious, Father, I pray that we would learn to respond in desperate praise. And we will be anxious for nothing. God, I thank you and I love you. I pray all this in your precious, powerful, and mighty name. And every person said, amen.